Welcome back to the Purple Politics Podcast. I'm your host, Ben.
I'm Rick.
And it's that time of the week where Rick and I sit down, go through last week's headlines, find out who's the headline heroes, figure out that little purple area between the words on the page. Hey everybody, Ben here. Due to a scheduling conflict, last minute one at that, Rick and I weren't able to sit down and discuss last week's headlines. Couldn't figure out the headlines heroes. But while we were trying to figure out exactly what to do with the show, we were both getting these social media memes about Andrew Cuomo stealing our guns. And of course, just like every other meme, nothing to reference, nothing to click on, no articles to follow, just rage, 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 scare, scare, scare. Everybody's afraid. So I thought it would be nice, and Rick agreed, to rehash some of our gun control policy episodes. We got everything from episode 1 all the way up to our interview with Steve McNogue about the Larry Sharpe campaign. So we'll get back to you next week with the articles. Everything's good over here. We got some great news. Just couldn't get together this week. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoy. On June 11th, the Associated Press reported that 3 people were killed and 8 wounded in Chicago shootings during a 3-hour span. Now, what the hell? Like, I know somebody's out there screaming gun control right now, but this is more than just gun control. And I guarantee if any of these guns were legal, it's amazing.
Yeah, Chicago's got it tough, man. I mean, they've had high murder rates for a long time. It's a very depressed economy there. The people who are there are people who have been there, again, for decades. It's just a genuine struggle for them. But the problem, I want to address this right so we don't get a ton of haters. The problem isn't necessarily the gun. It's the guns that they're getting. It's not that there's laws not in place. I believe they have some of the strictest gun laws there, but the surrounding states do not.
Right.
They can roll into a gun show one state over, fill their trunk, and drive back home. Yep. And there's nothing to prevent that. These are the areas that need to be tightened up. Because I'll tell you this. A person who abides by the law and follows the law to get guns, they go through the procedure, and they're not necessarily the ones creating the problem.
Everybody's worried about.
Yeah, it's the criminals.
Yep.
And even if we didn't have guns, somehow criminals will find a way to get guns.
But criminals, now that's a good point. And I think that the real issue is how we treat criminals. Since I'm only 40 years old, but since I've been a child, the way we've treated criminals and the way our mindset is towards jail and the justice system has completely changed. It just gets easier and easier and easier. You go by jails, nobody's working. You're always hearing about prisoner rights. You're in jail.
You have no rights. Listen, when you commit a crime and you're convicted of a crime and you're in jail doing your time, you don't have rights. Okay, you shouldn't have cable TV. You should have basics. You should have 3 meals a day, some rec time, and then if you want to shave some time off your sentence, or if you want to be, a better citizen, take a class. These things. I'm
fine with that.
Yeah, these things should be mandatory. But you know what? Sitting around lifting weights, hanging out, waiting for rec time, or playing cards, or whatever you do.
Still selling drugs. Still.
Oh yeah,
all the nasty stuff that goes on in there. I mean, people aren't scared of jail anymore.
No, why would you be?
Even me, I'm a wuss. I'm not that afraid of jail. I know I'd get my ass kicked.
Well, not really. You just go in and do your time, and all you got to do is go with the flow. You know what I'm saying? Here's the thing about prisons and jails. They have their own system. They have their own code. You got to follow it. You got to be with the program. If you understand the rules and you're down with the program, you're fine. If you go in acting like a punk or a big shot, you're probably going to get your ass kicked.
Yeah.
But, if you understand all that, and if you have that mindset going in, you're probably going to be fine. And here's the other thing, it just made me think, a lot of these, in Chicago, it was 3 killed, 8 wounded, in a 3-hour span. And that's tragic. This is just one of the stories that we hear out of there.
Yeah, I think I heard this morning, I think it was Maryland. I don't want to get this wrong. I don't have the article right in front of me. But for the first time in years, 3 different women were targeted for 3 different shooters. Since, it's been decades since the last time like I said, I don't have the article right in front of me. I just remembered reading it before I came over here.
Well, I think our jails, our prisons, they're also their businesses now. They're run by corporations. They have a bottom line, and they don't care. And you know what? You can go into any prison and talk to any prisoner that's doing real time, and they'll tell you. They'll say, "Hey, look, these guys don't give a shit about us. They don't care. We're just a number to them. And if they can keep us in here, they can keep getting paid." So there's nothing there to break the cycle.
Yeah.
And that's what's got to change. I'm sure when back in the 30s and the 40s, when county jails were run by the county, state prisons were run by the state, and actually, somebody was accountable for it, and it wasn't run to necessarily a bottom line profit. These guys had work camps. They were out working in the fields.
Yeah.
They were.
It was hard work.
Oh, it was hard labor.
They never want to do again.
Yeah, and that right there would keep me out of jail, because I'll tell you right now, if I had to go there and pound rocks or clear down a forest with a hatchet, I'd be, this is crazy. I would definitely think before I committed another crime, and I'm not talking, they're not all murderers that are in there. People are in there for white collar crime. People are in there for goofy stuff. I mean, that even brings us to another article.
One of the big things that we thought was a purple issue, not red, not blue, was gun control. We believe both sides are right in certain areas. And this week was a prime example. PBS NewsHour had that article about the Alzheimer's issue with gun control.
Oh, yeah. And, Alzheimer's is a horrible disease. I had a relative in my family that had it. It's not only hard on the individual that's sick, it's hard on the rest of the family. You have a grandparent, a loved one, a father that doesn't recognize you or doesn't know your name, how old you are, where they are. It's very painful. It's very personal. It's
absolutely one of the saddest things you can witness. And there's a man that's actually documented his mom's Alzheimer's, and you can find him on YouTube. I apologize. I don't remember his name right now. But it is just heartbreaking. 1 second she'll be talking to him as her son. Then the next minute he's asking her, "Do you know who I am?" And she's like, "Are you friends with my son?" I mean, yeah, it's devastating.
Yeah, very heartbreaking.
And it's got to be hard for her too. Like, she has to be struggling inside her mind.
Oh, the confusion. 1 minute you're talking to your son, and the next minute you don't recognize your own son. I mean, there's definitely pain for both sides, everybody involved. There's everybody's a victim, when it comes to that disease. It's horrible, and somewhere, somehow, somebody needs to try and figure something out to curb it, make it better, something.
Yep. And where this comes into the gun control issue is PBS NewsHour put out an article this week where they spoke about volunteers with the Alzheimer's San Diego, a nonprofit group. They realized that while visiting people with dementia, about 25 to 35% of those homes had guns in them. Now, it doesn't say whether all those 25 to 30% of those homes the guns were owned by the person with dementia, but there were guns in the homes, and they lead you to believe that they were owned by those people. Now, what are your thoughts on somebody with dementia owning a gun?
Well, first off, this is my experience with a relative that had dementia. They can almost be childish sometimes in some manners. So in my mind, it's like letting a child have a gun. They really don't go hand in hand. So I think, whoever else is in the household has to assume some kind of responsibility, maybe, change the combination to the gun safe, or, hide the gun somewhere where that individual, no matter where they're at in their time of memory, is not going to know where it is.
And I hate to sound disrespectful, and by no way do I mean it to be disrespectful, but at some point you do have to treat somebody with dementia as a child, because they are reverting back.
I don't disagree with that at all.
Yeah.
And again, this is,
and there are different levels to dementia. There's always going to be a beginning and an end, but we have to assume we're talking about the full-on stages.
Right. Yeah. And I think it starts out slow. I don't
Yep.
think they just wake up one day and not recognize everybody. I mean, there's different stages to it, at least, for, again, when I speak about this, please understand I speak from my personal experience on this.
Yep.
This is no research done, no articles read. I didn't speak to any doctors. This is just what life was like for me when I had a grandparent develop this. It's very emotionally, it's very difficult, it's very hard. And my experience was they seem to revert to the past.
Yeah.
It's not like they're in the future somewhere. They're in the past. They're either before you existed and they don't know who you are, or they're just almost have a little form of amnesia. They don't know who anybody is. But I wouldn't give a gun to a child, and,
Right.
and I certainly wouldn't want somebody that's suffering from dementia to have access to any kind of firearm.
Yeah.
That's why I say,
Especially if they are reverting to the past. Because in my mind, sometimes they don't remember who you are. Like I was just speaking about the YouTube video. So what if they mistake you for an intruder?
well, here's a perfect example. I mean, you have this PBS article, that you brought to my attention. I mean, here's a lady, her husband didn't recognize her and he shot her.
Yep.
I mean, it's horrible. It's a tragedy.
And it's so sad.
It's definitely sad. I mean, she called 911 and, said, hey, my husband accidentally shot me. He shot her in the stomach.
Yep.
And if I read the article right, I'd have to rescan it. I think he was a lawman in his younger years. So obviously had some familiarity with a weapon. Obviously didn't recognize her and he shot her in the stomach. It's horrible. It's horrible. And I'm not sure this falls under gun control other than gun responsibility.
Right.
Okay. I think, and I'm certainly not blaming the poor lady that was shot. But I think if you're aware that your loved one has this dementia, like I said earlier, maybe that's when you change the combination on a gun
Yep.
safe. Or if you don't have a gun safe, depending on where your laws are, where you live, maybe move that firearm to a relative. Or make it a little easier, go down to a gun store and buy a gun lock.
Yeah.
Hide the key somewhere. Is this unavoidable? 100%. You can avoid something.
Yes,
like this.
it's coming. And I will say this, the PBS article does go into the fact that there are red flag laws. So say the person with this dementia lives alone and you're his child or her child, and you fear for her safety because it's sometimes just the mere diagnosis, another thing it says in the article, does not disqualify someone from owning a gun. There are 11 states in America that have passed a red flag gun law, and this is a quote, that allows law enforcement or other state officials and sometimes family members to seek a court order to temporarily seize guns from people who pose a threat to themselves or others. And I'm assuming that the temporarily means until they're looked at by a psychologist or...
Yeah, I can already hear this argument because it's the government coming in to take a firearm.
Right.
But you have to look past this. If you don't want the government to act on something like this, then you, as an individual, have a responsibility within your family to take action yourself.
Absolutely.
Okay? This is real simple. If you can't take action on it as a family member, I don't think the government has a choice but to step in and do something.
It becomes a public safety issue.
100%. What if he doesn't recognize the paper boy?
I was just going to say the mailman.
The mailman. Anybody. Somebody lost, broke down out front, knocking on the door because their cell phone's dead and they need to get a ride and they get blown away at the front door. This is why I said I don't necessarily think that this is so much a gun control issue is firearm responsibility.
Yeah.
I believe there's a huge difference between the two. I think gun control is something that's handed down by the government. I think gun responsibility is something that's handled by the individual.
But I also would go one step further and to say gun irresponsibility is why we have a gun control issue.
100%.
And I don't really want to get too far into it because it's so far in the past, but you think about these school shootings.
Tragic.
Where are they getting their guns? The one person wasn't allowed to have a gun, and his mother bought him guns.
Yeah.
That is gun irresponsibility, and that's what brings along these questions about gun control.
Yeah. The young man from Sandy Hook.
Yep.
I don't think those were his weapons. I think they belonged to his parents.
Yep.
He had access to them. You know, if he broke into a gun cabinet or a gun safe, or if they were laying free in a closet, either way, if that parent, and this is truly my opinion, if that parent was that responsible with the weapons she had in her home, he wouldn't have been able to get to them.
And again, like I said, I don't really want to go too far into the school shootings, but I don't know if it's federal law or state law, but if you and I go and rob a bank and I'm done, I'm out, I'm ready to go, we're in the car, I'm leaving, and you decide you're going to shoot the teller just because you want to shoot the teller.
You're going with me.
I face murder charges.
Damn right you do.
So why don't these parents face murder charges with their children? Or should they face murder charges with their children if they are neglectful with their guns?
I think the mother was neglectful.
I agree.
That is my opinion.
That's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah.
Because it is a scary question because anytime a child gets a gun, even if it's locked up in the safe and they figure out the combination, then that still means the parent's neglectful. And this is where it's a blue and red thing, because then I don't really believe, if they just kept pressing buttons and they got into it, it was inevitable they were going to get it.
Right.
But if she's actively giving him a gun that he has been told he's not allowed to have, then I think she should face the same charges.
She might as well be sitting right next to him in court.
All right, we've done pissing off the gun control people.
Yeah. They'll get over it.
So let's take it down a notch. I hate to do it, but a 14-year-old Utah boy was killed from a stray bullet from a nearby shooting, or not a shooting range. Some people were shooting targets.
Yeah, originally I thought it was a shooting range, and then, of course, not being a headline hero, I actually read the article, and it was just some people, they had some targets set up.
They set up some targets.
Yeah.
Now, I haven't shot a gun since I was 13 years old, but when I did, it was my friend's father, and he taught me. So he could have been easygoing about it because I wasn't his kid, and I was only going to do it maybe one time in his head. He gave me the gun. He showed me the gun. He taught me all the parts of the gun. He showed me how to take it apart, load the bullets, everything, clean it, everything. Then we went out and we set up the range, put down the weapons, all unloaded, and then we walked. And when I say we walked as far as it would take those bullets to slow down. I can't remember what it was, but it was far.
Yeah.
And then we walked back and shot, but we were walking so that we knew what was behind. Because unless you're shooting against a metal barrier or
even a dirt pile,
something that'll stop the bullet.
Yeah, if you have a backdrop,
you may miss the tree that you're shooting the target on. You may miss the bale of hay that you're shooting the target.
Yeah, it travels.
You need to know what's behind there. So there was a trail directly behind this, and they were still shooting at it. And a family had just gone off-roading in one of their vehicles, and they heard a pop. Their 14-year-old boy slumped over in the back seat of the car, and he lost his life.
Yeah, it's definitely sad. It's tragic. This is really more about gun education. And I can hear people freaking out now. If we didn't have guns, this wouldn't have happened. Yup, and that one child that died eating soap. If we didn't have soap, that wouldn't have happened. Yep. I mean, you got to be realistic here. Education when it comes to firearms is extremely important. Yep. And it's got to be handled serious, and you have to pay attention to detail. You can't, you can't just grab a gun and start firing it.
Absolutely.
You got to realize, you have travel, you know what you're firing, how far the travel is. Like I said, a lot of people
know the weapons you can handle.
Yeah, and a lot of people that are into weapons, they know their firearms. They know what they're firing, and they're usually set up for it, not
Yep.
just a paper target. If especially in some rural areas where I've been, you'll see a couple mounds of dirt, and they're firing in, and the dirt is the backdrop, which will stop the bullet. So most people are aware of it. It sounds like.
Well, here's a quote for you, and this is what made me think about what I just said. So one of the people that was involved as a shooter, a potential, I don't know if he was actually the one that shot, but he was involved in the shooting, as well as other witnesses, stated that they didn't know that there was a road downrange and they couldn't see the vehicle because of the thick brush. But if you're shooting bullets, I'm going to assume if you're doing target practice, you're not just a target practice enthusiast. You're probably a hunter. So where do you hunt? In the woods. So you're shooting at the woods. You have to assume somebody's in there hunting.
Oh,
you may not think a car, but
yeah,
you still
100%.
assume.
And even let's say you own 10 acres. Even if you're on your own property, firing your weapon, you have to be careful. Somebody could be lost on your property. Yep. There's no excuse for this.
Yeah.
All right. But I also believe in my heart of hearts, there was no intent.
Oh, 100. I absolutely agree. And
so I don't want to go down that road. I'm just saying, this is gun education.
Yeah.
It's straight gun education. And if these people were educated properly, the reality is this doesn't happen.
Right. And I will say another reason that this story stuck out to me and that I wanted to talk about is, one, I felt bad for the child.
It's horrible.
I mean, that's a fluke accident, 1 in a million chance. The guy shot at the exact same time that the boy's head was going to be near the window, that the bullet, I mean, lots of things had to come into play. They didn't look, but I already know that the people are going to look at this and be like, that's why we need gun control.
Yeah.
But
it's not about gun control. It's about education.
Even his own uncle, who was in the car at the time, I believe, if I read the article right, he says the message we want to get out is gun safety. We don't want this to turn into a gun right issue.
Yeah, and that's what they're afraid of.
Right. Even the family understands that it was a learning thing. It wasn't
an accident.
Yeah, it was an accident.
Bottom
education.
line, it's an accident. And even if somebody is very educated, it could happen to them as well. It just sounds, really sounds just like a fluke thing.
Yep.
My opinion based on the article is, nobody was out there looking to harm anybody. They were out there, setting up targets, and unfortunately this young man lost his life. And he's not coming back. And that is a true tragedy.
Well, let's look at another topic that could come from this. So we both agree that it's not a get rid of guns issue.
Yeah.
But should the person who shot the bullet, because they didn't look, be penalized? I mean, obviously he's probably going to be facing some sort of civil charges, but should there be something that says that's 5 years, you're not allowed to shoot a gun?
Well, actually, he should probably face criminal charges.
I would agree.
I
wouldn't say murder or anything like that.
I'm not seeking the death penalty here or anything like that. I'm just saying, if they can identify, if there's 3 or 4 of them shooting and they're not sure which one actually fired the fatal shot, but if they know who it is, that individual very well could face, I would believe it would be a manslaughter charge.
Yep.
And it is what it is. It's unfortunate he lost his life, and it would be unfortunate that this person, would be charged. But at the end of the day, you're responsible for your firearm.
Yep.
And you're responsible for that bullet when it leaves that gun. You are 100% responsible.
Yep, I completely agree with you. Agree.
Do I want to see somebody go to jail? No, and I certainly didn't want to see a 14-year-old child lose their life.
Absolutely.
So there is no winner here. There is no winner here. But, without a doubt, I believe, and I would not be shocked if I saw, criminal charges, but like I said, we don't know if there's 3, 4 all firing at the same time.
Right.
Whose bullet, or, is it one gun and 2 people took a shot and they're not sure which, one.
Yep. And that's for his local county to figure out, I think.
Yeah.
I was just wondering about your opinion.
Yeah, I don't think it ends here.
No.
I really don't. And unfortunately, and I read what the uncle says, this could really go sideways. This could really, all it takes is for somebody to really blow this up and blow it out of proportion.
Yeah.
This will be this could be a gun control issue. And like I've said, and I'll say it again. This is about, when people say gun safety, I say gun education.
Right.
Being educated about guns is also learning gun safety. So education, education, education.
Yep.
You get educated to drive a car, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, you can kill somebody with a car. That's why you're taught how to drive and you get a license.
And if you do kill somebody, there's a charge.
There's a charge. And it's the same thing here. A responsible person educates somebody that they're teaching, and I have no problem. There should be an available class. Here in New York, we have gun safety courses that you must take for a handgun.
Yep.
Okay, but if you're buying a long rifle, there's nothing required.
I think that's in most places too. You can walk right into Walmart.
When you think about it, with the amount of firearms that are out in the public, maybe there really should be, some kind of education or class that, you take. What could it hurt?
For all, I believe, I agree with you. I think all guns, you should show up and be like, I took my class. I have to take a 5-hour.
Yeah.
The kids have to take a 5-hour now. I took my class. Can I please have my 22?
Yeah.
I completely agree.
Why is it you have to take a test to drive a car, but you don't have to take a test to fire a gun?
Because there's not an amendment for a car.
Yeah, well, I think
I absolutely agree with you.
Education
I know what you're
is
saying.
everything, and anybody that knows me, and Ben, you know this, okay? I am a strong believer in the Second Amendment. I believe in the right to bear arms. But I also believe in responsible gun ownership, and I also believe that you need to be educated before firing a firearm. And especially in this area, it's something that's taught from generation to generation. Grandpa teaches dad.
Yep.
Dad and grandpa teach grandson's son. And it's passed down. But this is a more rural type area, So I guess what I'm getting at, there's a lot of people that are not trained how to handle their firearm.
I'll be honest with you. If it wasn't for Jeremiah's father, Floyd, love that man, I wouldn't know a thing about weapons. And if somebody put one in my hand, I'd probably shoot myself.
Yeah.
And that's not a suicidal thing. I would accidentally set the gun off and shoot my leg or something.
It happens.
Absolutely. But because he took the time, he's like, if you're going to be on my property, there's guns here. You have to learn about the gun.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he even called my mom. He's like, I have to teach him because we have guns here.
Yeah, absolutely. And a reasonable individual does not have a problem with that.
Right.
Most Democrats would never even consider voting Republican. Let's find someone with crossover appeal that can actually take some of that Democratic vote away. And
I think Larry.
Well, I think
I really.
Yeah,
do.
I agree. But I think with his since we brought it up, his Second Amendment
Mhm.
plan is what's helping him break into that. And it's not like he just made it up to get
Sure.
the gun enthusiasts, but I don't personally own a
Yeah, I don't either.
firearm, but I can believe in the Second Amendment without
Sure.
owning it.
And Larry doesn't own a gun, to be forward. He lives in New York City, right? So it'd be
Right.
very difficult to do.
Yeah.
But and that's why he says, listen, I will defend all of your rights all of the time. Just because you live in New York State does not mean you forfeit your Second Amendment rights that were guaranteed to you under the Constitution. Moving to New York State does not change the Constitution. The SAFE Act was unconstitutional. Let's be honest.
It's a hot spot up here. The SAFE Act is a huge hot spot
Yeah,
up here.
of course.
You can drive down any road in a 20-mile radius of my
Mhm.
house, and I guarantee you're going to see, without exaggeration, 20 signs that say no
Yeah, the
SAFE
scope-
Act in their
Scope
front
puts
yard.
those out. Yeah.
And they've been there.
Mhm.
And they've been
Well,
there.
let's take a second to explain to the listeners what the SAFE Act actually did
Yeah,
to New Yorkers.
Of course.
if we
So
can.
the SAFE Act made thousands of New Yorkers literally violent felons overnight, because any gun charge, whether you actually discharged that weapon or used it in any kind of violent manner, if you were caught on a gun charge, you were a violent felon under New York State law. That is not okay, all right? Because there are so many people upstate who use it for hunting, for sport shooting, right? There's a lot of target shooting competitions in upstate New York. So if you have a pistol grip, Safe Act violation. If you have more than 7 rounds in your magazine, Safe Act violation. If you look at like the AR-15, the magazines, there's no such thing as a 7-round magazine. It's either 10 or 30. So now you're sitting there, like, if you get pulled over for any reason or you get in trouble, they're sitting there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Boom, you're going to jail. That's not okay, right? Because let's be honest.
That's crazy.
All the Safe Act did was target legal gun owners. People who own illegal weapons are going to get their hands on the weapons that they want.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if there's a Safe Act.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, you could have a Safe Act. You could even expand on the Safe Act. Look at Chicago, right? They have the strictest gun laws in the country. You could expand on the Safe Act all you want. It doesn't matter. Larry wants to kind of change the culture around, like, let's not be so afraid of guns, okay? Because legal gun owners very rarely shoot each other. Very rarely. And the Safe Act was a knee-jerk response to Sandy Hook. And realistically, school shootings are not an issue in New York. We don't have them here. So why did we pass that law? I'll tell you why. It was a virtue signaling law to say, look, we are doing something about this, even though it's not an issue here. That's all it was, and it's not fair.
See, I don't understand this whole making laws and doing this or that just because there's a lot of people making noise. Because nowadays, I mean, it's not like it used to be where it took a lot of people to get together to make noise. Now you got 2 guys sitting in central New York that can make a lot of noise just because they made a podcast. I mean, why do we base laws off of?
Yeah, I mean, you sound like a libertarian to me.
I think it's campaigning, though.
Yeah.
I really do. I think everything Cuomo does is
all about
campaigning
messaging,
because he has bigger plans than New York. He's going to run for president.
He's absolutely going to run for president.
And he's going to say, see you in New York, I made New York safe. I came up with the Safe Act. And nobody better check with any actual citizens or residents of New York to verify how everybody feels about that. Because if he actually listened to New Yorkers, he wouldn't have done it. So he's just
they make sure they ask people down in New York City.
Yeah, he's just
they didn't even have guns anyway.
New York City is his base. Let's be honest. New York City is his base, and that's who he's speaking to.
Sticking in the local area, this week, a 12-year-old 6th grade student from Grant Middle School named James Springer III was shot and killed on the north side of Syracuse.
Yeah, this is heartbreaking right here.
Absolutely.
Things like this should not happen in society. It's just terrible. There's so many victims here, and the young man lost his life. 12 years old. He hasn't even begun to live yet, and he's stripped. His life's been stripped away. It's definitely sad.
And this stuff's been going on more and more in the Syracuse area over the last decade or so. We never heard of this stuff when we were kids. And just to point it out, on October 3rd, a 15-year-old boy was fatally shot. On September 20th, an 8-year-old girl was among 5 people wounded by gunfire at a memorial for a man who died of cancer. They're at a cancer memorial, and all these people get shot.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And then a 14-year-old girl was shot and wounded a few blocks away from that a couple weeks later. Syracuse is getting bad.
Yeah, I was watching one of the news channels last night, and they kind of timelined the year. From the beginning of the year to now, I think it was 18 and under, and I want to say I almost think it was in double digits. And I was a little surprised. I mean, you hear the one that happened, last week, and then a few weeks before that, but anything before that, you're just starting to get numb to it. There's no reason children should be dying in the street from being stabbed, gunfire, be it they're being shot at, or somebody's just, spraying the area with gunfire.
And that word you just used, numb, that's such an important word in this because nobody should ever be numb to that.
No.
But it's happening so much in our area now that...
Well, I think it's a coping mechanism for a lot of people. What happens is, I mean, if you see this happening week in, week out, a couple times a month, once a month, whatever, it'll mess with your head. You just start, you start thinking, how bad is this place? And I got to tell you, Syracuse is not a bad city. You know, they do a lot of good things down there. The leadership has done a good job, politically speaking, you know,
Yeah.
for the Syracuse and Syracuse area.
And I believe Mayor Ben Walsh, every time I hear him speak or when he was running, I liked what he had to say.
Yeah.
This has nothing to do with them.
Yeah, no, he's going to do a good job. And I will say this, and I want to make sure I get this out here. We have the best chief of police in Syracuse. This guy has just done a phenomenal job since he's been chief. And man, let me tell you something. He's pissed. You
Yep,
know?
and we're going to play a clip right now. This comes from Syracuse.com. But this is Frank Fowler at a press conference about the incident.
There were some things that occurred in that neighborhood and the days leading up to this that we weren't aware of. Had folks in that neighborhood called the police, we would have been able to intervene. Now, I'm not saying that we would have saved this child's life, but I'm saying to you that I would love to have had a chance to save this child's life. Okay, there's a lot of things that we can do for ourselves that we're not doing for ourselves. When I stand at this podium and I ask for public cooperation, when children are hurt and we don't get the response that we need, then everybody needs to take ownership from this.
Now you can hear right in what he says, just the passion. And all he's asking for people to do, and he doesn't go into detail.
Just do the right thing. That's all he's saying. Just do the right thing. I mean, if that was your child out there, 12 years old. And
but he's saying that there's information out there that people knew about ahead of time that could have stopped this, and nobody called in. And I get we live in this society where don't snitch, and we pretend like we're all afraid of cops because all cops are bad. Yeah. That's not the case. And like Frank Fowler says, Mr. Fowler says, he goes, and this is a quote, had folks in the neighborhood just called police, we would have been able to intervene. He wasn't saying that he would be able to save the kid, but my favorite part of what he said is he was like, I would have just loved to have had the chance to.
Yeah, he wants to save a 12-year-old's life, and there's nothing wrong with that. And, you know, and here's the thing. You know, the information, they're really not releasing a lot of info. So we don't know if he was the intended target or, you know, if it was a stray bullet thing. There were a couple people shot.
But this is how bad it gets. So the next night they're doing like a candle vigil for the boy. Yeah. And they said it was going to start, and I forget the time, but we'll say 9:30.
I think it was 6:30.
Or 6:30, and people showed up at 6.
Yeah.
And by 6:24, people are running down the streets because somebody's brandishing a weapon. It's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, it's disgusting, you know?
I think we're at a time where I know everybody is showing all these videos of police brutality, but what Mr. Fowler just said right there, and the way, and I'm going to put the whole video on our purplepoliticspodcast.com so you can check it out there and you can just see how passionate he is. And it's not, I don't want to say it's anger, which I'm sure he's upset, but I think it's just how much he wants to fix his city, because this is his city. We don't live there, but this is our city too. And we've seen it over the past 40 years, not to tell you how old we are, but just go downhill. And I think a lot of it has to do with economics, not the right stuff coming in, job-wise at least.
Yeah. And even the mayor was upset, you know, in his comment. He said, you know, I'm profoundly sad and extremely angry. It's the second child that we've lost to gun violence in the last week.
But I would like anybody to write up, get a hold of us, and explain to us why, when we have information, we're afraid to call the police anymore. And do not dare say that you're afraid of police.
Yeah.
Because I think we're having a gang problem in Syracuse. I don't want to bring it. I didn't want to bring it up, but I just did. I think we have a gang problem. I think people are afraid. And I also think police nowadays are afraid to do a lot that they used to. Because the tactics that you have to do to get gangs off the streets are not kosher. No. Especially in YouTube society.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to take a moment to point out that Syracuse has been having some issues, but I really do appreciate Frank Fowler and how he handles himself sometimes. Because people might say he's being an asshole, like when you look at him on the thing, because he just waves. He's like, all right, let's go. And he kind of pushed somebody out of the way to say something.
Yeah.
But you have to be tough sometimes.
I mean, you got 2 kids in the last week that are dead from gunshots, 2 separate incidents.
For absolutely no reason. Complete bullshit.
Yeah. And I have a funny feeling he probably believes he could have did something here and maybe this young man would still be alive.
I agree with you.
You know, 100%. I'm sure it'll come out.
That was the Purple Politics Podcast Gun Show episode. I'd like to take a moment to thank the Philadelphia airport for the 3.5-hour layover. 3.5 hours has never flown by so fast. Remember to leave a comment at purplepoliticspodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook at Politically Purple or on Twitter at Rick and Ben. If you've enjoyed this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you leave a 5-star review. And next week we'll get back to the headline heroes. Thanks for listening.